Good evening.
Good evening.
Let's see, by way of announcements, there are a couple I need to make. First of all, when you go into the fellowship hall, the tables to the left, there are two tables there that have some items on them that you are free to take if you want them. Only the items on the tables, those two tables, please. If you purchase books for the ladies' Bible study, that will begin on January the 22nd at 6 o'clock. And that will be in the fellowship hall. Holiness Summit is next week. There are flyers in the vestibule with more information on them. Please pick one up. We do need desserts, so if you would like to make a dessert for that, please do so. And bring them next Wednesday night, yes. And I'll make sure that they get over there or get somewhere. All right, there is a youth planning meeting. When is it going to be?
Sunday.
What time? $5 o'clock. Youth planning meeting, Sunday at 5 o'clock. We need you here. Reminder, if you have a prayer request or an announcement that needs to be added to the bulletin, please email to info@forestgrovempchurch.com so that Miss Angie can get that information in the bulletin. Also, the Wednesday night menu has been updated. If you have not signed up yet, it's not too late. All right, any other announcements that we need to make? Reminder, too, that the Sunday school devotion sign-up list is out there as well. So. All right, prayer requests. Carrie. All right, Carrie Montgomery.
Y'all be in prayer for us. We went to pull out of the yard in our vehicle, and it died in the road. Luckily, we was able to get it back in the yard.
All right.
My grandpa told me the water.
Mm-hmm.
His kidneys aren't working right.
Okay, Tony DeLauder. Okay. Okay. Max Davis. Continue to pray for Miss Glenda. She did come home, but needs our continued prayers. Mr. E.W. Was able to come home as well, but does need our continued prayers. We had mentioned Dee Porter was in a real bad before Thanksgiving, that's right. He is home, but very slow recovery, so continue to pray for him. Claudia Johnson, we've been asked to put her on the prayer list. Miss Bonnie's not feeling well tonight, so let's be in prayer for her. Miss Elaine. And I think several others. But any other requests? fellowship. I remember seeing it. Babs had shared it, but I can't remember the name. Yeah. Yeah, high school student that just, it's a tragic situation, so let's be in prayer for them.
And Kennedy and Justin and Parkland.
Yeah. All right, Dalton, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the wonderful chance to come here to lift up our brothers and sisters to you, to just come and join together in fellowship and praise, Lord. We do lift up each one that was mentioned upon the prayer list. You know each and every need. We pray that you just place hands on those that are sick or not feeling well, Lord, that you just give peace and comfort to those that need it. Lord, you know each and every need, and we pray that you just touch them right now, Lord. We pray for your anointing upon the teachers, upon Brother Bobby. But most importantly, we love you, Lord, and we praise you. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Let's walk to class. Yeah. You started celebrating yet? Yeah? Then I'll go ahead and tell you happy birthday then. I'm going to go ahead and say it now because I'll forget tomorrow. That's why. Yeah.
The boss was like, because if you only do the flip-flop, and I did about working and not working more and not working. She said, well, happy birthday. I said, well, you still birthday? I'm not kidding. That's my celebration. Stay home, want to like them to stay home, be depressed, just go to work and work. It's been a bad week at work, so I just decided I'm not going to.
It's just another day.
No, it's a special day. All birthdays are special. God gives you another year. It's a special day.
Mm.
That's how I feel about it. I don't care who you are. So if I want to be sad, I'll be sad. Yeah, get over myself.
Don't worry. Be happy.
Because
All right.
putting it in force is something else.
What's that?
Putting it in force is something else.
Yeah, well, mind over matter, isn't that what they say? Depends on the matter. All right. What does Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1 say? I think it is 6:1. Is that right? Yeah, Ephesians 6:1. Oh, you don't want to read
Let
it?
me tell you, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. What does that mean? Yeah, kind of sounds like a group of parents with unruly kids got to Paul and said, "Hey, Paul, you need to write something about this because, you know, we got to get control of these kids, right?" But actually, he's quoting which commandment? Or referencing, I should say, not quoting it, but referencing. But what number is that? Are you sure? Is that your final answer? Fifth commandment, right? And it is the only commandment with promise.
I didn't want to say because I cheated. I saw verse 2.
What is promise? What is the promise there?
That you may live.
That you might survive, yeah. And if you disobey, you may not survive, right? Our parents did teach us a lot, but we talked about this some Sunday, and it's interesting that this lesson kind of ties in with that. But if honoring our parents is so important to God, why did Jesus say we should hate them? Did Jesus hate his parents? In comparison to how much we love God? Okay. So, what Jesus was not saying was that you should hate your parents, okay? Let's make sure we understand. And you're right, Tricia, that is, it's a comparison. But to kind of, emphasize context, right? What's the context? To whom was Jesus speaking? Well, I should tell you where we're at, so you can know what we're talking about. Luke chapter 9, beginning with verse 57. And he's talking to these large crowds of people that are following him. And these people that are following him for a couple of reasons, none of which are good. One is they just want to see him perform miracles. Do you remember when Jesus was about to be crucified and he went to Pilate, and Pilate found out he was from Galilee, and so he sent him to Herod. And Herod was all excited because he had been wanting to see Jesus perform miracles. That's it. He just wanted to see a magician, basically, is what he was looking for. And so when Jesus went to Herod, Jesus didn't do anything, didn't even talk to him. And so he was, of course, disappointed. But these people that followed Jesus around were kind of like that. They wanted to see him perform these wonderful miracles. And they did. They saw him perform some amazing miracles. They were even able to participate in some of those miracles. For example, when he fed the 5,000 men. So probably 15,000, 20,000 people that he fed that day. They were able to experience that. But a lot of these people didn't care too much for the Pharisees because the Pharisees were, we'll just say they were the holier than thou people. And they didn't like some of the things that they did. And so when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, he didn't have very many nice things to say to them or about them. And so a lot of the people were following him for all of these reasons, none of which were good reasons, really. And so when Jesus is talking and saying this, he's talking to these people. And he's saying to them, if you don't love me more than you love your parents, I'm paraphrasing, then there's a problem. And this is what the problem is. So these people that were following him also didn't take Jesus seriously. Again, they were just looking for the miracles. They just wanted all the fun stuff. But Jesus was looking for, and still is looking for, true and faithful disciples. people that will follow him for the right reasons and will do the things that he's asking them to do. He's looking for people who will put him first. Remember when the young man came to, when the lawyer came to Jesus and said, what's the greatest commandment? They were trying to trick Jesus, remember? And Jesus looked at him and said, well, that one's easy. He quoted the Old Testament. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then Jesus added, and the second is like to it, love your neighbor as yourself. So Jesus is putting an order here. Love God first, love others next, and love yourself last. We used to sing a song in Belize called J-O-Y. J-O-Y, J-O-Y. Jesus first, yourself last, others in between. And this is the concept that Jesus is speaking here when he says that if you don't hate your parents, or if you don't love me more than your parents, to paraphrase it, to rephrase it, then you can't follow me. That's what Jesus was saying to them. And so when we talk about what Jesus is looking for, he's looking for people that love God. What does it mean to love God? More correctly, what does it look like when someone loves God? They obey his commandments. What else? They serve him. Okay, anything else? I already said that. They obey him. I think you're the one who needs those here in the 8 cents. How about doing acts of kindness, acts of service, acts of showing others the love of Christ through their actions? We would call it compassion, having compassion on them. We would call it benevolence. We have different names, different titles that we give to it. But basically what it comes down to is that when we see someone that needs the love of Christ, we give that to them in however it's needed. So, for example, and the other thing is we're going to share Christ with them. We're going to share the love of Christ, because the ultimate purpose here, the ultimate goal is to help others come into this right relationship with God, to have a relationship with God, to be a friend of God. And so if you're talking to someone and they, let's say they're hungry, they haven't eaten in a day or two, they're going through a hard time, and they haven't eaten in a couple of days, and you go to them and you say, man, I want to tell you about Jesus Christ. They going to listen to you? All they can hear is their stomach. But if you say, come on, let's go to the restaurant, let me get you something to eat. And then while they're eating, you say, let me tell you about Jesus Christ. You think they might be more willing to listen then? Sure they will. Because we have shown them that love through our actions. If we don't show our love through our actions, then we're not going to be able to share Christ with them. So he wants us to love through acts of service, acts of kindness, and also sharing the good news of Christ. And of course that means that we've got to do what he's asking us to do. Following Jesus also means we will not let the negativity of others keep us from his path. I've gone to meddling, hadn't I? Let me give you an example of this. The year would have been probably 1955. Mom and Dad were living in Biloxi. Dad was pastoring a church in Biloxi. His brother had gotten him a real good job at Keesler Air Force Base, teaching radar. So he was a civilian instructor teaching radar there on base, making real good money. A call came. Brother Lunsberry had started the work in Belize, and unfortunately his health was declining, and so he was going to have to leave the field. And so the need for a missionary came out, and when Dad heard the call, he responded. A little backstory. When Dad was a teenager, he felt the call to go to China as a missionary. This was about the time that World War II was going on, and of course China was then closed to American missionaries, basically. And so Dad knew that he would not be able to do that, so he continued pastoring. And so in 1955, then, when this call came, Dad responded, and his answer was, I may not be able to go to China, but I can still serve where I can. And so they made the choice to go to Belize as missionaries. Now, Dad's brother especially, Uncle Rodis, was not real happy with him, and some of the others as well, but he especially was a little upset with him because it's like, you know, I've got you this good job. How can you leave the security of what you have to go to a country like, well, then, British Honduras? Now, understand, British Honduras then was much more backward than it is now. In fact, then it was still a British colony, and they still drove on the wrong side of the road then, and it was not developed anything like it is now. And so Dad's family and Mom's family too looked at this, and they were like, you know, how can you do this? How can you leave the security to go and do these things, to go and do this work? Now, they could have listened to that and said, well, you know, you're right. We'll just stay home because it's safer. It's more secure for us to do so. But they didn't. They chose to obey God, even though there was negativity, even though their family disagreed with it. This is what Jesus is talking about here. When he says to hate your family, he's not saying literally to hate your family, but that you must love God more than you love your family and their opinions. So if their opinions or their influence or their statements are contradictory to God's word or to God's call, then to whom do we listen? We should listen to God, right? And that's what Jesus is saying to us, that God comes first. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, even more than your mother and father. You don't disrespect your mother and father, but you have to love God first. So how can I love God and hate my family? Well, the short answer is we can't. But we don't. We're not supposed to hate our parents, our family, our friends, our neighbors. But our devotion to God must be even greater. And that's what you said, Tricia. And is that our love for God, our dedication to God, our surrender to God must be greater in comparison to anybody and everybody else. We choose to follow Jesus regardless, and even if no one else will. You know, it's kind of difficult sometimes for us to understand this, but when Jesus says that we must take up our cross and follow him, well, let me ask it in a question. Is following Jesus easy? No? Mm-hmm.
So that's what makes it hard. All the distractions.
The distractions, those that are opposing us, those that are, maybe they're not outright opposing us, but they're not encouraging us. Maybe they're just kind of throwing roadblocks in the way or trying to keep us from doing what God wants us to do. No, following Jesus is not easy. In fact, there are times that it's downright hard. And sometimes it's the hardest thing that we may ever have to do. But when we choose to put God first, and when we're obedient to Him, to live for Him, and to serve Him in the way that He is asking us to do, whatever that is, then we will be a blessing to others. Our lives will show others the way to Christ. And that's what God intends for us. He intends for us to show others Christ through us. We are to be, Paul calls us imitators. I think a good word for it is a reflector. When you take a flashlight, if you were to have just the bulb and you connect it to a light source outside and you light it up, how well would you be able to see? Not very well, right? Maybe just a little bit about where you are right now. But when you put it in with that reflector, and especially with a lens on it, and you turn that light on, now the light is reflected and it shines brighter and farther than what it does without that reflector. We are that reflector. The reflector has no light in itself. So when you've turned the flashlight off, it's dark. It doesn't show anything. But when you turn it on, the light reflects and shines out. And that's what we're to do in our lives, is to reflect the light of Christ through our actions, through our words, through our lives, so that when others look at us, they see Christ in us. And that's what Jesus means when he says, it's time to stop, huh? Okay. Well, that's what Jesus means when he says, hate your mother and father. Hate your brother and sister. Not literally hate them, but choose me over them. That's what Jesus is saying. And the fact is that when we do that, when we choose Jesus over them, we're not disrespecting our parents and our family. In fact, we then become a blessing to them and are able to draw them closer to Christ as well, just as we draw closer to him. Choose to obey, choose to follow Christ, even when no one else will. Questions? Comments? Y'all are quiet tonight. All right, if all hearts and minds are free, then let's stand and